It's a curiosity. It has literally never been easier in the history of humanity to find information you're looking for. That isn't to say all information is equally easy to find. Some information can be incredibly elusive. Still, imagine trying to find that same bit of information before the advent of powerful search engines, before the advent of the internet, or before the rise of libraries. Now, this is a topic I could launch into for hours, so let me get straight to the point before I start spinning tangents. Easy access to information has created a paradox in modern life. Information that's easy to obtain rapidly becomes difficult to manage. Maybe you haven't experienced this paradox yet, but I suspect you probably have. Have you ever, for instance, found a note you wrote and marked as important, but you can't remember why or even what it means? Have you ever come across a file on your desktop with no recollection of how it got there or why you downloaded it in the first place? Have you ever downloaded a stack of papers for a project and lost track of which ones you've read and which ones you haven't? Have you had to click on dozens of open tabs in your browser to find the page you want? Have you ever forgotten just which reference has the information you need? Have you ever lost a file somewhere on your hard drive? I suspect all of you have had at least some of those experiences, and many others like them. And here's why I find this phenomenon so curious. These are common frustrations of modern life. They're completely predictable. Indeed, they're inevitable in an environment where information is so easy to obtain. Why then does no one teach us how to manage the information flowing into our lives? Now, the library has endless tutorials on how to search databases, find books in the stacks, download papers. They even have reference librarians available to help you develop strategies to find what you're looking for. Professors will often develop lessons in how to search the literature in their field. In fact, in some majors, they have entire classes dedicated to that. Almost nowhere, though, will you find instruction in personal knowledge management. And I think that's absolutely insane. We need to change this, and that's why I've structured this next assignment the way that I have. Now, I have all sorts of tricks up my sleeve for keeping track of what I've read and for juggling references. I'm not exaggerating when I say I'm actually planning a course on this subject. Here, though, I just want to introduce you to one of these techniques, the annotated bibliography. At its heart, an annotated bibliography is a tool to help you manage information. However, it's a bit more than that. Done properly, an annotated bibliography is a way of synthesizing complex information, distilling each reference to its essence. We've encountered something like that before in article abstracts. However, an abstract attempts to create a thumbnail of the whole paper. Abstracts summarize the rationale for the study, its objectives, methods, results, and conclusions. An annotation, by contrast, is both simpler and more elegant. An annotation is a note to your future self that says, these are the main takeaway points from this paper relevant to the project that you're working on, and this is how it might be useful to your project. When you annotate, then, you're not trying to tell yourself everything that's in the paper. Rather, you're just pulling out the juiciest, most interesting, most relevant bits to you and what you're working on. Okay, I know that at this point, some of you are rolling your eyes thinking, yeah, sure, but why would I need to do that? I only need 12 references for this project. I can easily keep track of that. On the surface, that seems like a fair point. However, there's a fundamental flaw embedded in that argument that you might not be considering. While it's true that you only need to cite 12 primary references for your capstone project, you're probably going to have to read at least 3 times that many to learn about and refine your literature review. Are you as sure about your ability to remember all the details you need from, say, 36 references? From 48? I hope that shakes your confidence at least a little bit. Now, imagine how many times you'll need to read parts of each of those references if you don't take good notes along the way. How many times are you willing to scan each of those 36 references in order to verify if the paper you need to support a key point in your literature review is this paper as opposed to that paper? And especially if that paper has a similar title, or it's by the same author, or it's on the same topic. So yeah, I get it. It seems like a nuisance to write annotations. It seems like an extra, unnecessary, time-consuming step. The truth, though, is that taking a few minutes after reading a paper to jot down why that reference is relevant and recording how you might use it in your own project will save you a ton of time down the road. It's really a small investment that pays huge dividends, and not just because it saves you time and helps you keep track of what you read, but also because an annotation is an act of synthesis. And an act of synthesis helps you clarify your thoughts about your project, and it leads you more quickly to concrete research questions, which is something that most people struggle with in any kind of literature review. So now that we have an idea of what annotations are meant to do, let me also show you what they're supposed to look like. Here we have a sample memo annotated bibliography, but with the annotations taken out, right? This is what most people think of when they think of a bibliography. So over here on the left, we have the memo. So it's got the date, to, from, and the subject. And throughout it all, we have properly cited sources. So these are all in the correct JAMA format. And you can go here and, if you want to know where this particular bit of information came from, then it comes from reference 5, which is this paper over here in the bibliography. So far, everything's working just fine. And this is why bibliographies are powerful in your own research. You can read something and find where they got that information. So if you want to learn more about it, you can follow up. But this is not particularly useful for writing. When you're writing, you're going to have a stack of papers, all of which are relevant to the project, but each of which is relevant in a different place. And if you're trying to just figure out and try to remember where all of those come from, you're going to be lost. It's going to take a lot more time. And with the passage of time, you're going to be dealing with this project for weeks. With the passage of time, some of the details are going to get fuzzy. So this is why annotations are so powerful. Okay, so here we have that same memo, but here we have the memo with the annotated bibliography. So same thing here, everything's in the correct format for JAMA citations. But now if we go to the first citation, Phillips D.P., The Influence of Suggestion on Suicide, Substantive and Theoretical Implications of the Werther Effect, now we have an explanation. This is the annotation. This is the annotated part of the bibliography. If you're missing this, you don't have an annotated bibliography. You just have a bibliography. And I also want to make it very clear, you need to annotate for this assignment every single citation. For your rough draft, that's going to be 6 citations. For your final draft, that's going to be 12 citations. For both of them, every citation needs to be annotated. So in this case, this article is one of the first to use the term Werther effect, which is an important part of the subject of this project. In this study, researchers found that suicide rates increased after stories of death by suicide appeared in newspapers. So that's what this study finds. That's a note to yourself, so that when you see this same paper 3 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now, you'll remember what it's about. And where do you see it fitting into your project? It's important to my project, this student's project, because it helps establish the phenomenon I want to study, and it serves as a foundation to the rest of my work. So this is a note to yourself that when you come across this paper again, you'll go, okay, I was going to use this as the starting point, my introduction, to base the rest of my literature review on. Contrast that with a reference later on. So let's look here at Reference 7, Wheeler L. toward a theory of behavioral contagion, published in Psychology Review. This paper is a systematic review of psychological research on behavioral contagion. It is important because it articulates one of the first theoretical explanations of contagion. While providing background information, this also helps lay the framework for understanding the unknown for my project. So again, it has a brief explanation of what this paper is. It's a systematic review. And why is it important to this project? Well, it's important because this is going to help set up the unknown. This isn't going to set up the whole project. It's just going to set up the unknown, the research question for this particular paper. Just to give one more example, let's see. Let's look at reference 12, the sociology of emotions. This reference provides baseline understanding of the theoretical work being done in sociology on human emotion. It's useful because it provides competing theories about social contagion effects and social learning theory. As we'll discuss a lot this semester, a great source for unknown is when you have different theories that may be in conflict with one another. Outlining these theoretical differences will be key to explaining the gap in scientific understanding that my project will identify. So again, this student is going to identify a gap based on these different theories. So hopefully you can see that when you annotate your bibliography or you annotate your sources and then later put them into a bibliography, that helps you write. It helps you synthesize the information that you're processing so that you'll remember it better. And again, you're leaving breadcrumbs to yourself down the road so you can remember what this paper was doing, why you think it's going to be useful. And so when you go to write, you know, okay, well, this paper is going to fit into this place. This paper over here is going to fit down a little bit later. This paper sets up my unknown. This paper explains some of the difficulties. That's what an annotated bibliography is meant to do. It's meant to serve as a guide and a reference to help you manage all of the knowledge that you're going to be taking in for your capstone project. So yes, it feels like an extra step. It feels like it's tedious, but it's actually going to save you a lot of time down the road, especially if you take into consideration that this isn't just something to be done for this particular project, but is a knowledge management tool that you can use as you move on in your career. We take in information constantly. We're bombarded by information constantly, and it's easy for us to fall into the trap of thinking that, well, this information is easy to find, I can find it again, and I'm going to remember it. You aren't going to remember it. You're not going to remember it probably even a week from now, but certainly not months from now, certainly not years from now. So having a system in place to remember what it is that you're reading and to be able to synthesize it so that you know what you're using it for is a huge life skill that everybody should learn, develop, hone, practice, and keep with them for their entire lives. So hopefully that helps. Remember, this is what my expectations are for your annotated bibliography for your memos. Remember again, for the rough draft, you'll have 6 references, each of which will be cited in your memo and each of which will be annotated in the bibliography. For your final draft, you will have 12 references, each of which will be cited in the memo, each of which will be annotated in the bibliography. And this is what it should look like. So, I hope this is helpful. So remember, be gentle with yourself and kind to one another. And thanks for watching.